Welcome to our deep dive, into this whole world of mindsets. You shared Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, and I've
Yeah.
got to say, it's really got me thinking about, how our beliefs about ourselves can shape our lives.
Yeah, it's a game changer for sure. Dweck's research goes beyond just describing these mindsets. He really digs into how they play out in real life, from relationships and school performance to how we approach success in our careers.
So let's start with the basics. Dweck talks about these two main types of mindsets, right? Fixed and growth.
That's right. The fixed mindset kind of operates under this assumption that our intelligence and talents are basically set in stone. Either you're born with it or you're not.
So if you're stuck in that fixed mindset, does that mean you might avoid challenges because you're afraid to reveal what you believe are your limitations?
Exactly. With a fixed mindset, failure becomes this threat to your ego. It's all about validating your worth instead of focusing on personal growth. But then on the other side, you have the growth mindset, where you believe that your intelligence and talents can be cultivated through effort and consistent learning.
So it's more about the journey of continuous improvement, rather than being fixated on reaching some fixed destination.
Yes. Imagine it like this. Those with a growth mindset see a mountain as this opportunity to challenge themselves and learn new skills. But someone with a fixed mindset might look at that same mountain and think, well, I'm not a mountain climber, and never even try.
I see how this could apply to so many areas of life. But can you give me a specific example of how these mindsets play out in the real world?
Yeah, so one of Dweck's early studies was having children solve puzzles. And what she noticed was this striking contrast in their reactions to difficulty. Children with a growth mindset, they actually got excited when they encountered a challenging puzzle, viewing it as this chance to really stretch their thinking.
Well, the kids with a fixed mindset probably shut down when things got hard.
Exactly. Those kids saw difficulty as a sign of their own limitations. Like, if I can't solve this, I must not be smart enough. That's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy.
I bet this becomes even more apparent as these kids, go through adolescence and they face those bigger academic and social challenges.
So Dweck actually followed a group of students through junior high, and the results were pretty fascinating. The students with a growth mindset actually saw their grades improve over time. Even when they hit some academic roadblocks, they were resilient. They sought help when they needed it, and they weren't afraid to experiment with new learning strategies.
What about the fixed mindset students? Did their grades suffer because of that?
Sadly, yes, they actually saw a decline in their grades. Because they were so afraid of confirming this lack of ability, they avoided putting in any extra effort.
Dweck also talks about the myth of the natural right, this idea that some people are just born with exceptional talent. I'm curious what she has to say about this.
Right, it's a common misconception. Dweck challenges this idea by looking at stories of celebrated figures like Mozart, Darwin, Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth. And what you find is that their accomplishments weren't just because of some magical talent.
So even Mozart had to put in the hours of practice.
Even Mozart. What set these individuals apart was their dedication, relentless practice, and this desire to learn. Take Wilma Rudolph, for example. She was an Olympic champion who overcame polio as a child. And her story is just an amazing example of how much humans can grow when it's fueled by that determination and belief.
So it's not just about having talent or not. It's about how you cultivate and nurture that talent. But I think a lot of people still fall into that trap of comparing themselves to these so-called naturals. It can be really discouraging.
It is, and that's where that fixed mindset can be so limiting. Instead of focusing on your own growth, you get caught up in comparing yourself to others and feeling inadequate. It's like you're always trying to prove your worth instead of embracing that journey of learning and development.
I can see how this whole fixed mindset could also show up in relationships. You might feel the need to constantly prove you're worthy of love or that you're good enough.
You're spot on, and this plays out in a few different ways. Someone with that fixed mindset might avoid showing vulnerability because they're afraid of being judged or rejected. Or they might blame their partner when there's conflict, instead of taking responsibility for their own actions.
So instead of seeing challenges as these opportunities to grow together, they're seeing them as threats.
Exactly. Dweck shares a few different stories that show how this fixed mindset can really sabotage relationships. Remember Ted and Karen from the book? They had this huge fight about a messy house because they both felt personally attacked. They were so trapped in their own fixed mindsets that they couldn't see things from the other person's perspective.
Sounds like they were more concerned with being right than actually trying to understand each other's feelings.
Exactly.
Are there other ways that this mindset can hurt relationships?
Absolutely. Another common pitfall is unhealthy competition. Instead of being supportive, Couples with fixed mindsets might constantly try to outdo each other or feel threatened by their partner's successes.
So is there an example in the book that shows this?
Dweck talks about Susan and Martin. Martin's fixed mindset led him to feel threatened by Susan's growing popularity, even though he was also successful. He was operating under this assumption that someone had to be better. And if Susan was getting more attention, that meant he was somehow less worthy.
Wow, that's a recipe for resentment and insecurity. It's like they're playing this game where only one person can win.
Exactly. And it's the opposite of the growth mindset approach to relationships, where partners view each other as allies. On this shared journey of growth and development, they value effort communication and working through challenges together.
Dweck contrasts Susan and Martin with Laura and James Wright.
Yes, Laura and James are a great example of how a growth mindset can help a relationship. James was really supportive, and it helped Laura overcome her own defensiveness. And they both saw their differences as these opportunities to learn and grow together.
So they weren't afraid to show vulnerability or admit when they were wrong.
Exactly. They created a safe space to communicate, and they focused on understanding each other, even when they didn't agree. And that's a key part of any healthy relationship.
This is all so insightful. It's making me really think about my own relationships. I'm curious to hear more about how these mindsets affect friendships.
Well, for starters, a fixed mindset can make people more likely to be shy or have social anxiety. They might avoid socializing because they're afraid of being judged or not being interesting enough.
So they end up isolating themselves because of that fear.
Often, yes. Dweck mentions this research by Jennifer Beer showing that shy people with both mindsets initially felt anxious in social situations, but those with a growth mindset were able to push past that and engage more effectively. They saw the situation as a challenge rather than a threat.
And I bet that made them more likable and fun to be around.
Exactly. They were able to connect more authentically, even though they were still shy. It's a great example of how a growth mindset can help build stronger relationships.
Okay, what about friendships where you feel drained or less than after? Is there a connection to fixed mindsets there?
Often there is. Dweck talks about how some people with a fixed mindset use friendships to boost their own egos at the expense of others. They might put their friends down, undermine their achievements, or try to one-up them. It's like they need to feel superior to feel good about themselves.
Dweck shares that story about the woman whose sister gave a speech at her 50th birthday party. That was basically a roast disguised as a tribute, right?
Yes, it's a perfect example of how people with fixed mindsets use humor to hide their own insecurities and assert their dominance.
It's a good reminder to be careful who we're friends with and surround ourselves with people who lift us up.
Absolutely. True friends are supportive, encouraging, and genuinely happy for each other's successes. They don't need to compete because they're secure in themselves.
This is making me realize how common fixed mindset thinking really is. I can see it everywhere. What about bullying? It seems like an extreme example of a fixed mindset gone wrong.
You're right, bullying is complicated, but Dweck's research does offer some insight. She argues that bullies often act out of insecurity and a need to feel powerful, even if it hurts others.
So they put others down to try to make themselves feel better.
Exactly. They target people they see as weaker or different because it gives them a temporary sense of control.
It's really sad. It says a lot about their own struggles.
It does, and Dweck discusses how this thinking can be really damaging for victims. When someone constantly hears they're stupid or ugly or worthless, it's hard not to start believing that.
Especially if it's coming from people they look up to.
Exactly. Dweck shares a story about a young woman who was bullied throughout school for everything, and over time she started to believe it and developed insecurities that lasted into adulthood.
It's a sad example of how a fixed mindset can really hurt someone. And Dweck also talks about how fixed mindsets can stop people from intervening right.
That's right. Sometimes it's fear, but there's also this tendency to rationalize the bullying by blaming the victim or downplaying it. It's like they're protecting their own mindset by pretending there's no problem.
And that silence can be really harmful.
It is. Dweck emphasizes how important it is to create a growth mindset culture in schools, where differences are valued, effort is celebrated, and bullying isn't tolerated.
So it's about creating a place where everyone feels safe to be themselves
Yeah,
and learn without being judged.
exactly. Dweck shares some great examples of schools that are doing this well. She talks about Stan Davis. He's a therapist who developed a program for reducing bullying by using growth mindset ideas.
Instead of just punishing the bullies,
Yeah.
he tries to help them understand why they do it.
Yes. He teaches them to see their actions as choices that can be changed, not as part of who they are. And he praises them for trying to improve. Instead of just calling them bad kids, it's about giving them the tools to grow.
It's amazing how shifting mindsets can make such a big difference.
It is, and it all starts with understanding where those mindsets come from.
I'm guessing a lot of it comes from childhood and what we hear from parents and teachers.
You're right. Dweck really explores this in her book. She looks at how adults can either encourage a growth mindset or accidentally create a fixed mindset.
I'm already cringing at all the times I've praised my kids for being smart. I had no idea I was contributing to a fixed mindset.
It's a common mistake. We think we're building their confidence, but we're actually telling them that their worth is tied to how well they perform. Dweck suggests this can make kids more afraid of failure and less likely to take risks.
So instead of praising intelligence, we should praise their effort and strategies.
Exactly. We need to emphasize the process, not just the outcome. For example, instead of saying, "You're so smart, you got an A," you could say, "You worked really hard on that, and I'm proud of your effort."
And that makes sense. But what about criticism? We can't just give kids constant praise. How do we give feedback without triggering that fixed mindset?
That's a great question. Dweck says to focus on the behavior, not the person. So instead of saying, "You're so careless, you always make mistakes," you could say, "I noticed you missed a few steps here. Let's go back and figure out where you went wrong."
So it's about helping them learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. And it's about framing mistakes as opportunities to grow, not as proof of their limits. Dweck talks about how important it is for kids to feel safe to experiment and make mistakes without being judged or punished.
It's like we need to make mistakes feel like stepping stones.
Exactly. Dweck tells a story about a boy who was struggling with math. His mom encouraged him to tell his teacher he tried his best, but his dad immediately told him to go to his room.
Wow, that's sad. You can see how that would affect how he sees himself.
It is. It shows how important it is to be careful what messages we send, both through words and actions. Kids are always watching and learning from us.
Okay, so we've talked about parents. What about teachers? Their influence must be huge.
It is. Teachers play a crucial role in shaping mindsets. Dweck found that teachers with fixed mindsets often give up on students they think aren't smart enough.
That's so sad to think of kids being written off like that.
It is. And those teachers often focus on evaluating and ranking students. Instead of creating an environment that helps them grow, they might praise the gifted kids while neglecting the ones who struggle.
So the smart kids get the message that they're brilliant.
Yeah.
And the struggling kids think they're not good enough.
Exactly. It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Dweck compares this to teachers who have growth mindsets. They believe all students can learn and improve, and they create classrooms that encourage effort, collaboration, and a love of learning.
So it's about making learning fun and exciting.
Exactly. And these teachers are always looking for new ways to help their students learn. They give constructive feedback in a supportive way.
Dweck gives some inspiring examples of these teachers, right?
She does. She talks about Marva Collins, who had amazing results with underprivileged kids in Chicago by creating a growth mindset school. And she mentions Rafe Esquith, whose fifth grade class in LA tackles a really challenging curriculum with joy and collaboration.
That's amazing what can happen when teachers believe in their students.
It is. And Dweck's research proves that a teacher's mindset can have a big impact on how well students do. So even if you're not a teacher, you can advocate for this growth mindset in your kids' schools.
All this makes sense for school. But what about in sports? Coaches must play a big role too.
They do. Dweck has a whole section in her book about coaching styles and how they can either promote a growth mindset or reinforce a fixed mindset. She compares two approaches, John Wooden's and Bobby Knight's.
I'm vaguely familiar with them, but remind me who they are and what made their coaching so different.
So John Wooden was the coach of the UCLA Bruins men's basketball team. He led them to 10 championships in 12 years. He was really known for focusing on teamwork effort and personal growth, both on and off the court.
So he wasn't just about winning. He really cared about his players as people.
Exactly. Wooden believed that success came from effort preparation and always striving to improve. He famously said, "The main ingredient of stardom is the rest of the team," which sums up his philosophy.
That's beautiful. It reminds us that true success is about everyone.
Now, Bobby Knight was also a very successful college basketball coach, but he was known for his temper and his very demanding coaching style. He won 3 championships with Indiana, but he was also known for his outbursts and confrontations and his tendency to blame his players.
So we have the Zen master versus the drill sergeant. How do those styles relate to mindsets?
Well, Wooden's approach was all about growth mindset. He focused on teaching mentoring and inspiring his players. He emphasized effort, teamwork, and continuous learning. He created a culture of respect and support, where mistakes were seen as opportunities to grow.
It sounds like he was building leaders.
Exactly. Now, Knight's approach, while effective in some ways, leaned heavily on fixed mindset thinking. He often relied on intimidation, criticism, and this win-at-all-costs mentality.
Which can be really damaging to young athletes.
Absolutely. Dweck argues that this kind of coaching creates fear and anxiety, where players are afraid to make mistakes. They might play defensively, avoid taking risks, and lose their passion for the sport.
So it's not just about winning. It's about how the coach affects the players.
Exactly. And Dweck points out how Wooden's growth mindset approach created this culture of resilience teamwork and a love of learning that extended beyond the court. His players were often successful in other areas of their lives because they took those lessons with them.
We've covered so much in this deep dive, from the basics of mindsets to how they show up everywhere.
It's a lot to take in, but the good news is, even if we've been living with a fixed mindset, we can learn to shift to a growth mindset.
So there's hope for us fixed mindset folks.
Absolutely. In the next part of our dive, we'll dig into direct strategies for making this change. She outlines some practical steps for rewiring our brains for growth.
I can't wait. This is making me think differently about how I approach challenges.
That's a great first step. Awareness is key. Once you start recognizing those fixed mindset patterns, you can challenge them and choose a different path.
Stay tuned, everyone. In the next part of our dive, we'll explore how to cultivate a growth mindset and start unlocking our true potential.
Welcome back to our deep dive into mindsets. We saw how that fixed mindset can really hold us back. But the good news is, it's not permanent.
That's a relief. So if we realize we're stuck in that rut, how do we actually change something as deep as our mindset? If it feels like trying to reprogram our brains.
It is a challenge,
Yeah.
but it's definitely possible. Dweck says it's not a quick fix, it's an ongoing process. You have to be aware of those fixed mindset patterns and then consciously choose to react differently in a way that helps you grow.
So self-awareness is the first step.
Exactly. You start by noticing those moments when you feel threatened or defensive, or maybe you resist feedback. Those are usually signs that your fixed mindset is taking over.
I can relate to that. I've definitely avoided new challenges because I was afraid of failing or looking stupid.
Yeah.
It's easier to just stay comfortable.
That's a classic fixed mindset response. But once you're aware of it, you can challenge it. Ask yourself, what are you really afraid of? What's the worst that could happen? What can you learn even if you don't get the result you want?
So it's about looking at the situation differently and focusing on the potential for growth instead of being scared of failing.
Exactly. And remember that real learning comes from effort and experimenting, not just from getting a specific result. Dweck also talks about surrounding yourself with people who believe in you. Find those people who give you honest feedback and support you.
Like having a growth mindset cheer squad.
Exactly. It's so helpful to have people who inspire you. Dweck even suggests finding role models who have that growth mindset.
Like Serena Williams or Simone Biles, they're always pushing their limits,
Yeah.
even when they're already the best.
Those are great examples. And it doesn't have to be someone famous. It could be a teacher, a mentor, a friend, anyone who motivates you to stretch yourself.
This is all inspiring. But I have to admit, I'm also a bit overwhelmed. It's a lot to take in. It seems hard to change years of fixed mindset thinking.
It's a journey, and Dweck knows it can be tough. She even talks about the journey to a true growth mindset.
Tell me more about it. Where do we even begin?
The first step might surprise you. It's to embrace your fixed mindset.
Really? Why would we do that? It's holding us back.
It's not about giving in to those negative thoughts. It's about admitting that we all have them and that they've probably helped us in some way before.
So instead of denying them, it's more about understanding them.
Exactly. It's about becoming aware of what Dweck calls our fixed mindset persona and seeing how it affects what we think and do. She even says to give it a name.
That sounds a little weird. But I'm curious, how does naming our fixed mindset help us change it?
It helps separate those negative thoughts from who we really are. It's like saying, oh, there's negative Nancy again trying to bring me down. By naming it, we can expect it and learn how to deal with it.
So it's less about fighting those thoughts and more about managing them.
Exactly. It's like having a mental sparring partner that you can practice your growth mindset on. Dweck gives some examples of students who've done this. One student named hers Gertrude. She said Gertrude was cagey, histrionic, and self-aggrandizing. Gertrude would always show up when she was facing a challenge, whispering doubts and fears.
I think we all have a little Gertrude in us. That voice telling us we're not good enough.
Absolutely. But by becoming aware of it and its triggers, we can start to take back control.
So we've acknowledged those fixed mindset thoughts and given them a name. What's next in this journey to a growth mindset?
Dweck says to create a real plan for growth. It's not just about thinking positive, it's about setting goals, making strategies, and sticking to it, even when it's hard.
So taking action is important.
Absolutely. And remember that setbacks and failures are going to happen. They're part of learning. Dweck says to view those moments as chances to grow, not as reasons to quit.
It's about being resilient and not giving up.
Exactly. And it's about enjoying the journey. Dweck tells the story about a talented quarterback who got drafted by his dream team, but then crumbled under the pressure. He was so focused on proving himself and not failing that he forgot his love for the game.
It's like his fixed mindset sabotaged him.
Yes, and it reminds us that even when we're successful, we can still fall into that trap. The journey to a growth mindset never really ends. It's about recognizing those patterns, challenging them, and moving forward.
So how did the quarterback turn things around?
He started by admitting to his fixed mindset. Then he worked with a therapist to develop a more growth-oriented approach. He stopped focusing on what other people thought and on the outcome. He focused on effort, the process, and learning from mistakes. He had to rediscover his passion for the game.
It sounds like he had to refocus on what he could control. His effort, his attitude, his willingness to learn, instead of obsessing over things he couldn't control, like what others thought were the result of every game.
Exactly, and that's a great lesson for all of us. The more we focus on what we can control, the more power we have to face challenges and achieve our goals.
This makes so much sense. But I'm realizing that changing my mindset also means changing how I talk to myself. Those negative thoughts can be really sneaky.
You're right. Our self-talk can be our best friend or our worst enemy. Dweck gives some good strategies for changing those negative thoughts.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, one is to just become aware of your self-talk. Pay attention to what you're saying to yourself, especially when you're stressed. Are you putting yourself down? Are you imagining the worst? Are you comparing yourself to others?
I'm definitely guilty of all of those.
Most of us are. But once you're aware of those thoughts, you can start to challenge them. Ask yourself, is this thought even true? Is it helpful? What's a more positive way to look at this?
So we're teaching our brains to be more supportive.
Exactly. And Dweck also suggests replacing those negative thoughts with positive ones. For example, instead of saying, I'm not good at this, you could say, I'm still learning, but I'm getting better. Or instead of, I'm going to fail, you could say, I'm going to try my best and learn from it.
It sounds simple but powerful.
It is. Our thoughts affect our feelings, and our feelings affect our actions. So by changing how we talk to ourselves, we can create a more positive cycle.
This is so helpful. I'm starting to feel better about developing a growth mindset.
That's great. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. You'll have good days and bad days, but the more you practice, the easier it'll get.
So we're aware of those fixed mindset patterns. We're making a plan for growth. We're embracing the journey. And we're learning to challenge those negative thoughts. What else can we do to make this growth mindset really stick?
Dweck talks about understanding how our brains work. She developed this program called Brainology that teaches students about brain plasticity.
Wait, so our brains aren't fixed. They can actually change and grow.
Exactly. Our brains are amazing. They adapt all the time. And every time we learn something new, we're creating new connections. It's like building mental muscle.
So we're not limited by the intelligence we're born with.
Right.
We can get smarter through effort and learning.
Exactly. And Dweck's research shows that just teaching students about this can make them more motivated. They're more willing to try hard things and keep going when it's tough because they know their brains can grow.
That's really empowering.
Yeah.
Especially for kids who've been told they're not smart. It gives them a new way to see themselves.
It does. And it's not just for kids. Adults can benefit from this too. It can help us overcome those beliefs that we can't do things.
Yeah.
And embrace the idea that we can always learn and grow.
I'm going to learn more about brainology. This is making me want to see what my brain can do.
It's a fascinating field. And the more we understand our brains, the better we'll be at developing a growth mindset.
So we're recognizing those fixed mindset patterns, making a plan, embracing the journey, challenging those negative thoughts, and understanding brain plasticity. Is there anything else we can do to really make this growth mindset a part of us?
Dweck talks about finding joy in the process of learning and growing. It's about focusing on the rewards of effort, challenge, and mastery, not just on what other people think or the end result.
So enjoying the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. It's about enjoying those moments when you learn something new, overcome something hard, or just celebrate your progress, no matter how small.
Like a mental high five for all the effort.
Exactly. And remember this journey to a growth mindset. It never really ends. There will be times when you slip back into those old patterns, and that's okay. The important thing is to notice it, challenge it, and keep going.
This has been eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing things differently.
That's the power of understanding mindsets. It can change how we see things and open up new possibilities.
But I also feel a bit selfish. It's one thing to change my own mindset, but what about the people around me?
Yeah.
How can I help them make this shift too?
That's a great question. And it leads us to the final part of the growth mindset puzzle, helping others embrace this way of thinking. Dweck believes we should all create a growth mindset culture in our families, schools, workplaces, and communities. And in the last part of our dive, we'll explore how to do that.
I can't wait to hear more. I'm already thinking about how I can use these ideas in my own life and share them with people I care about.
It's an exciting journey. And the more we spread this growth mindset message, the more we can create a world where everyone feels empowered to reach their full potential.
Welcome back to our deep dive on mindsets. We've learned about fixed mindsets and how to develop a growth mindset. But it's not just about changing ourselves, right?
Right. It's about creating a growth mindset culture in our families, at school, at work, and in our communities.
So how do we spread that growth mindset love? It's like trying to convince people to think differently.
It's not about convincing anyone. It's about creating spaces where that kind of thinking is encouraged. And it starts with what we say and do.
I'm thinking about our talk about praise and criticism. Instead of telling kids they're smart, we should praise how hard they try their strategies and when they don't give up. And with criticism, we should focus on what they did not, who they are as a person.
Exactly. Those are great examples of how we can promote a growth mindset. It's also about how we react to challenges because kids are watching us.
So we need to show them how to bounce back and learn from mistakes.
Exactly. If kids see us giving up or blaming others, they're more likely to do the same.
But if we show them that it's okay to try hard things, to ask for feedback, and to keep going even when it's tough, they'll learn that it's okay to struggle and make mistakes. They'll know they can always grow.
Exactly. And this isn't just for parents and teachers. It's for coaches, mentors, even older siblings, anyone who has an influence on a child.
It really does take a village.
It does. And it's not just about kids. We can also encourage a growth mindset at work.
How do we do that? Should I give a presentation on brain plasticity?
Maybe for some people, but it's often about the little things we do every day.
Like what?
Start by noticing your own words. Instead of saying, I'm not a math person or I'm too old to learn new things, challenge those phrases. Try saying them in a way that shows you're open to growth.
So instead of, I'm not a math person, I could say, I haven't figured out math yet, but I'm willing to try.
Exactly. It's about using language that shows possibility and growth. And it's about celebrating effort and progress in yourself and others.
So we should notice all the little steps along the way, not just the end result.
Yes, and encourage others to do the same. If someone at work is struggling, ask them about what they've tried, what they've learned, what else they could do. Help them see it as a chance to learn, not a failure.
It's about creating a place where people feel safe to try new things and ask for help.
Exactly. Dweck says that's how you get creativity, innovation, and growth. Remember those companies we talked about? The ones with growth mindsets were more creative and successful.
That makes sense. When people feel safe to try things and learn from mistakes, they're more likely to come up with good ideas.
And they're more likely to keep going when things are hard. Spreading the growth mindset isn't just about being nice. It's about making a stronger society.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new way of looking at things.
It's powerful stuff. I encourage you to learn more about it. Dweck's book, Mindset, is great, and there are lots of other resources out there, too.
I'm definitely going to read it. And to everyone listening, we hope you'll join us on this growth mindset journey. It can make your life better in so many ways. Thanks for listening.